Hi, everyone. Welcome to our career clinic today. My name is Stacy Patola, and I work in the Center for Career and Professional Development. I am the career consultant for our STEM majors, and I'm so happy all of you are joining us live today for this webinar. Again, this is our February career clinic, and the topic is all about career pivoting. So just to provide a little bit of insight on the topic, pivoting does not imply starting from scratch, but instead building upon previous successes. And so we really do hope that at the end of this clinic, it's just going to serve to help you see that career pivots are more than obstacles. They're opportunities to grow and gather knowledge and carry it with you to each new venture. So if everyone can just take a moment to scan that QR code on the screen to check in for us, and no worries if you don't have time in this moment. Before I move on to the next slide, there will be another chance at the end of the presentation if anyone misses it, but just scan that really quickly and check in to the presentation today. Also, please note that we are going to be recording today's presentation, so those that registered but were not able to attend live can still have access to this incredibly valuable content. So while everyone's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and take us to the next slide. Again, we frame these career clinics all around our career readiness competencies. And so just to give you a little bit of feedback on that, the National Association of Colleges and Employers have come up with sort of 8 different areas to be career ready. And so our goal when putting on these clinics each month is to empower students to develop in these areas and just help you recognize where there are areas needed with growth and just how you can do that. So please allow me to take just a few moments to introduce our amazing guest speaker, Trent Coggins. Trent is a triple bear, having earned his B.A., M.B.A., and J.D. from Mercer University and an L.L.M. in business transactions from the University of Alabama. You'll see that he is no stranger to career pivots today, as he spent around 20 years in private legal practice, transitioning to a faculty member in accounting and business, along with serving as the director of entrepreneurship at Valdosta State University. And now he is also the proud founder and owner of Recoil Trampoline Park. So I'm sure many of you have questions. How did he make all of those incredible jumps, and what knowledge did he take from each one? So I'm so excited to not only introduce him, but for him to take us through these pivots and really just provide more insight on how he carried the knowledge from each one into the next venture. So Trent, I'm going to hand it over to you at this time. Please feel free to take it away.
Well, the first thing that I'm thinking is maybe I don't know how I did all of that, but we'll get there. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet with everybody at Mercer. I don't get back to campus as much as I would like to, but any connection back with Mercer is near and dear to my heart. As Stacy said, I spent a lot of time at Mercer University, and I am proud of all of that time because it has made me into the person that I am and given me the opportunities that I've had so far. So it's really good to be with you guys. So I guess in thinking about what I would talk about today and how all the career pivots happened in my life, as you said in the introduction, I had the ability to practice law for 20 years and then pivoted into the academic world, and at the same time found myself running a surprisingly successful business here in Valdosta. Where did all of that begin? And I guess it began with education. So I kind of think that we need to go through my particular story so that you can appreciate some of the transitions that we had. I grew up in a small town in North Georgia called Calhoun, Georgia. Actually, I grew up in the suburbs, which was the joke. We didn't even have a stop sign in the little town that I grew up in, but decided to come to Mercer out of high school. And I was the stereotypical, this kid needs to go to law school type of student. And I was told that I would argue with a stop sign and therefore would make a good lawyer. Hindsight's 2020. I don't know that that's necessarily the best traits for a lawyer to have, but we can talk about that later. but came to Mercer, and I'll be honest with you, I did whatever it took to get by. I was not by any stretch of the imagination the best student, the most studious person. I had my fun while in school and still progressed. I did graduate in 4 years, which looking back upon it now, I don't know that may have been a miracle. But I'll be honest, at the end of 4 years of school, even with, my undergraduate degree was communications and political science double major. Two of the majors that you would think is required to go to law school, or two of the most popular ones. But by the time I was a senior, those dreams of going to law school kind of put aside for a little bit. I was tired and not really ready to take another step in career development. So ironically, I was a student leader on campus. I was a senator in the Student Government Association, and so had some good connections, and Mercer offered me a wonderful job at the time. So when I graduated, I went into admissions and started recruiting for Mercer, and spent 3 years actually as an admissions counselor, going around all of the Southeast, trying to convince students to come to Mercer. Ironically, they didn't pay us anything back in the day. I don't know if they're still, I don't know what the pay rate is, but now, but one of the great perks was that you could go to school for free. So after you work for 6 months, you could end up getting a second degree. And my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife and still is, we have 4 boys together. My wife Anna was a Mercer student as well, and she was trying to get into the pharmacy school and taking hard classes like organic chemistry and physics and all of those crazy science classes that I stayed away from as much as possible. She was struggling and I was partying. Not necessarily partying, but I would come home from work and, hey, let's go get some dinner and let's go to a movie and let's have some fun. And she was trying to study and failing at the time. And she basically told me, look, you've got to get a hobby. Why don't you go take a class at the business school? Because I knew about the perk. I had never taken a business class in my entire life. But I decided, okay, well, I need to get out of her hair and let her study. Let's go see what this business school thing is all about. I don't remember the first class that I took, but I started the business school and really liked it. I think my undergraduate experience, I kind of went to college because that was the thing that I was expected to do. But somewhere along the way, I realized that doing this M.B.A. program was, for the first time, I was doing it for me, not for anybody else, not for a family member or any expectation. And I really enjoyed it. I still tell people now that my M.B.A. Was the degree that actually turned me into a student. It was also the degree that that really made me think, you can do whatever you want to do. But it's turned out to be my most valuable degree. I rely on that degree every single day. I still think about the classes that I took. But that, it took me about 2.5 years because I didn't have any of the prerequisites with my undergraduate degree. So I had to do the prerequisites first and then transition into the business school for the M.B.A. I did really well. It's where I learned to become a student. And by the time I was finished with the M.B.A., I knew that it was time for me to go to law school, that I was ready as a student, I was ready as an individual. And so I, at the end of the program, started applying for schools and Mercer obviously was my #1 choice. They were the last school to admit me, but I'm still thankful for that. I was admitted at some other schools, and I think Samford University even got some deposit money out of me. But once Mercer accepted me, I knew that that's where I was going to go. And so that's how I ended up becoming a triple bear. Became very, I enjoyed law school as far as the academic side. And I know a lot of people think that's crazy because law school is very rigorous, but I enjoyed it. But I graduated from law school and moved to Valdosta, Georgia, which is where I am now. And I've been here for about, I think I'm working on my 23rd year in Valdosta, something along those lines. And I worked at a law firm for a little while. And I worked as an insurance defense attorney. And I realized that that business bug was starting to bite me, and I wanted to be my own boss and open my own law firm. So immediately, I think after about a year of practicing with an insurance defense firm, I opened my own practice and became a transactional attorney. I did real estate, wills, trusts, those types of things. And had a pretty nice run at it. Really enjoyed it. I didn't do a whole lot of litigation, but the litigation that I did do was very interesting. But litigation seemed to take a lot out of you personally, and I tried to stay away from that as much as possible. Let's see, it would probably be about 8 or 9 years ago. Valdosta State University reached out to me, and actually one of my clients was the associate dean at the School of Business at the time, and he reached out and asked me if I would be interested in teaching a class as an adjunct professor, what we would call business law. I think Mercer still has. Well, I remember taking the class at Mercer. We called it Intro to no, not Intro. Legal Environment, I believe, is what it was called back at Mercer. But I had the opportunity to start teaching that class on a part-time basis, and I really liked it. It kind of got me back into the academic world, and so I started teaching one class a semester, and that just kind of started to grow. I went from one class a semester, maybe 2 semesters, to full-time around the year, maybe 2 classes a semester. And then finally, about 3 years ago, we started some discussion here at Valdosta State about bringing me on full-time. And I knew that if I was going to be full-time, I needed to complete an advanced degree. And so I started getting an L.L.M from the University of Alabama, and I finished that degree last year. And so I was hired on, as a full-time faculty member here at Valdosta State, and made that transition. When the opportunity came to become full-time, I shut my practice down after 20 years of practicing and transitioned on into academia. And it has been a wonderful transition for me. I thought it would be a little more difficult. It's actually been a lot of fun, because I get the best of both worlds. I get the academic side, but I also get to tell all the war stories from when I was practicing law, and all the crazy things that happened from that side. So transitioning as a professor has been a wonderful transition for me. I didn't realize as a lawyer, especially as a transactional lawyer, the stress that I was under personally. I always had a saying. My primary practice was real estate, and my primary saying was, "There's no such thing as a real estate emergency. Don't call me at 9 o'clock on a Friday night and tell me that you have a real estate emergency. the courthouse is closed. There's nothing I can do about it. I'll talk to you on Monday morning. I knew I didn't have a stressful litigation practice. Like I say, I still did some, but not to the extent that some attorneys have. I did not realize the stress I was under until I transitioned into the academic world, got away from some of those pressures, and my blood pressure immediately just dropped. That was one of the side benefits from me making the career transition. Don't get me wrong, I thoroughly enjoyed being an attorney. I thoroughly believe that it prepared me for everything that my life has brought me and up until this point. But I'm enjoying being a professor a whole lot more at this point than I enjoyed being an attorney. Ironically, along with that, while all this transition was occurring, I became what I call an accidental entrepreneur. I sure didn't intend to open a side business that has turned out to be very successful. But my wife, Anna, who I've already mentioned, and I have 4 boys. Anna is famous for her day trips. So she will prepare a day trip for us, and we go do whatever it is that she comes up with. And about 5 years ago, she wakes me up on a Saturday morning, which is one of my pet peeves. I like my sleep, but wakes me up and says, "Get up, we're going to take the boys on a day trip." And I said, "Well, where are we going?" She said, "We're going to a trampoline park." And I said, "What in the heck is a trampoline park?" I'd never even heard of it. But we had to, there's nothing like that in our town. So we had to drive a pretty significant ways to get one. I understand that there's 2 trampoline parks in Macon now. But we didn't have anything like that in Valdosta, Georgia. So she said, "Wake up, we're gonna get ready and go to this trampoline park," and take the 4 boys there, and they immediately loved it. And I watched them play at all the different apparatus that they had there, and I sat there for about 15 minutes just watching them play, and decided that I started looking around and saw the crowd that was in there, and I went and grabbed a drink and sat at the front door and just watched people travel in that door. And the famous saying that starts, in my opinion, starts a lot of businesses. My town needs something like this. And I started thinking that Valdosta could use some entertainment for kids. I'm raising 4 boys in this town, and there wasn't a lot there. So I started investigating. And at the time, I'm thinking, well, if you're going to do something like this, you need to have a franchise. So I started reaching out to all the franchises and saying, "Hey, have you thought about Valdosta, Georgia?" And it was a depressing couple phone calls. Every single phone call told me Valdosta is too small. It'll never work in a place like that. You're wasting our time, basically. So I actually put the professor hat back on. I went and did what we taught our students in the School of Business, what I learned in the M.B.A. I dusted out the books and said, "Hey, how do we put a business plan together? Let's investigate this from an academic side and determine if it will work in a place like Valdosta." And so my research led me to several places that are small towns throughout the entire United States that are similar in size to Valdosta. And I started finding family entertainment centers that worked there, and really put a business plan together, and ended up building my own business because I made the determination, after looking at all the costs, everything that was involved in that process, that it would work, that I would be successful with it. And I tell this story a lot, but in putting that business plan together just like we learned, in the School of Business, I put together some financial numbers, and I remember trying to estimate what all my expenses were. And believe it or not, based on everything that I had learned through the School of Business, I was pretty good at that. I was prepared to put something like that together. If you go back now and look at my pro forma that I put together, I was pretty spot on with every single expense that would be there, and not a whole lot of surprise expenses that I didn't anticipate. So I was very prepared there, except for one spot. And it was probably nobody's fault but my own. I can't blame this on any education. I missed my payroll by a mile because I underestimated the amount of people that it would take to run a business like mine. Now, that was easy to fix, but I underestimated that by a mile. But I was really prepared to put that plan together. But I did three things. I looked at those expenses and I said, okay, what's my break even with what it would require to run this business? What pays the overhead? And then I did a conservative estimate. If we have 100 people show up on a Tuesday and 100 people show up on a Wednesday and 500 people show up on a Saturday, what is my, what do I really think a conservative approach would be here? And then I did what I called my home run. If we hit these numbers, I'm going to be really excited about this business. We opened that business in September of 19, before COVID hit, 5 months before COVID, and immediately knew that we were going to far exceed even the home run numbers. Within about 2 months, we were running at about 150% of what I estimated as my home run numbers. So I immediately, again, the education that you received in the business school is now you've got to protect that business. The first thing thought in my mind is I've now educated everybody in Valdosta that something like this will work, and maybe I've educated potential competitors. So I started immediately looking at ways that we could improve that business. And so we've gone through several different phases. We added laser tag to the trampoline park. We added that we got delayed by COVID, but we added that in September of 21. In the summer of 22, we added a really neat virtual reality. It's a 5D gaming experience. And then 3 weeks ago, we opened an arcade. So now I've become the arcade man in Valdosta. I don't know if I'm known more as a lawyer, a professor, or a entertainer, but I still wear two of those three hats. I don't practice law anymore, even though I maintained my license. I just find that it's easier not to do that kind of stuff. Even if doing it on the side, it's with the two things that I have going on. But the two businesses that I'm in, the professor world and the trampoline park world, kind of go hand in hand. But I really, if you look at where I've ended up, I think the education that I've received allowed me to make those moves and pivots. I was talking before you guys came in. One of the things that I wish that I knew is when I went to law school, no one told us, you can do more than just practice law with a law degree. While I was still practicing law, some of the people that I was most envious of that were my peers when I was in law school were the people that were doing absolutely nothing related to law with their law degrees. We had people that are now in the news media. We had people running their own businesses. We had people working for large corporations, not even in the legal departments. We had some of those too, but I wish somebody would have really impressed upon me, you can do more with this law degree than just practice law. I ultimately made that transition. Yes, I do say that my most valuable degree was my M.B.A. That was what gave me the idea of trying to bring a trampoline park to Valdosta. But I had to rely on that legal degree daily in order to open that business, and still do. There's a lot of legal liability in a business like that. A lot of my education is tax wise, and I have to use that on a daily basis. But just all sorts of different contract negotiations and things that are required, I use those degrees. I would never tell someone not to get a law degree, but I would tell them, don't necessarily think that you're pigeonholed into what the stereotypical practice of that degree requires you to do. That would be my advice to anybody that was thinking about that or any other type of degree. Don't necessarily think that just because you get I use my wife for an example, a pharmacy degree means that you have to work in a community pharmacy for the rest of your life. There's all sorts of other opportunities within whatever degree that you have chosen, other than just the standard. And I think that's been really important to me. I'll say this, but before I open it up for closing or for questions, I also say that there's been a lot of luck in the transitions that I've made. And I'm not a preacher by any stretch of the imagination, but there's been some divine intervention in there as well. The Lord has certainly put me in the place that I think I needed to be. We may have taken a long route to get there, but at 50 years, it's pretty scary. I started making the changes in my career at 47. I know that probably sounds ancient to most of you guys, but at 47, it can be pretty scary to think that you're going to start a new career in a new business. It was certainly, there were some sleepless nights when I was making the decision to make those transitions, but it was obviously the right move to make. And so I'm very fortunate that I had those opportunities. But I think that's all. I mean, that was a long-winded explanation of what it took to get me here and the transition. I am happy to answer any questions that you guys may have about my story or anything in particular that you are concerned with.
If no one wants to mention the questions out loud, that's totally understandable, but just know we are watching the chat right now. If anyone wants to insert them in there, I know Trent is more than happy. In the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much, Trent. I can't really even describe how well said all of that was, and I know everyone online enjoyed it, and there are going to be thousands who benefit from the recording of it later. So just thank you so much again. I loved that.
Well, I'm happy to do it. You're asking me to talk about me. That's not necessarily a hard thing. It took me a long time to realize that if you have a story to tell, you need to tell it, because it will be beneficial to other people. But yeah, I'm glad to be able to spend some time back with Mercer.
I see a question in the chat here, Trent. It says, do you mentor others that may be headed on the same path?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. And so I get to do it a couple of different ways. Number one, now I'm exposed to students on a daily basis. I teach a lot. My classes at Valdosta State are a lot bigger than the ones at Mercer. Now, I'm going to say this, and y'all don't tell anybody. I think it's a benefit that you guys are in small classes with 20 or 30 students. Don't tell my dean I just said that. My average class is about 75 students. So it's hard for me to get to know the students, like your professors, get to know you guys. That being said, students will seek me out here, and that is one of the benefits of my job, is that I get to say, okay, where are you in this process? Why are you thinking about going to law school? Let me challenge you to think about that purpose. Other than the number one reason I get, why do you want to go to law school? The response is, I want to help people. Well, okay, but nurses help people too. Let's dive deep into that and say, okay, why do you want to go to law school? Are you prepared to go to law school? Are you interested in, what type of law are you interested in? Those types of things. And then transition them all the way into going through the application process. And I thoroughly enjoy that. I actually wrote a letter of recommendation today, right before this, for a very good student to go to law school. But that is, I will say that one of the things that I said in the lecture, I now bring into my interviews with students. Don't think that you have to practice law. I hope you remember this after 3 years of law school, but don't think that you have to be a stereotypical lawyer. You can do anything with this degree. So yes, I'm able to do that here. And I'm also able to do it with the business as well. And again, that goes back to a lot of the students that we have here. Ironically, my business is about 4 blocks away from my office. And half the employees that work for me are Valdosta State students. So there is a lot of combination between me speaking here about Recoil Trampoline Park and in other places. And of course, I've spoke at Mercer about that as well. So I'm now starting to kind of mentor students in their business. It also helps that I have now been named the director of the Lee Entrepreneurship Center here at Valdosta State, which that is our job, is to help students incubate their ideas and actually start business here on campus. And I will plug Marco Horn, who has been my mentor. Y'all have a wonderful entrepreneurship center. And I have stolen so many ideas from Marco that it's shameful. But I do need to give him credit, and y'all credit, for that center that you have there. It is a wonderful facility. We are ready to open our new facility here. It's not as big as what you guys have, but we're proud of it, and maybe it will continue to grow. But yes, I have those opportunities. I thought I saw another question pop up.
I did see another question in the chat, and I'll say that, but one thing I do want to point out is Trent pointed out something very, very specific, and I'm glad he was as explicit about it as he was. And he essentially said to know your why. You can't just say, I want to do this or I want to do that. We all have a why for why we want to pursue that pathway. And so I think it's really important. He's sort of pointing you back to reflecting on that before, going down these pathways. And I think that's really important. And he's talked a lot about his own why today. But to move into the next question, it says, Trent, I know you said you created a business plan. About how long did it take to develop all of the costs involved?
It took a while, believe it or not, because again, I'll go back to the fact that I started trying to get a franchise to look at us. If you open a business with a franchise, they're really going to help you with all of those estimates. It's going to change from location to location, but they're going to give you a format. I didn't have that because I was developing my own. So one of the things that I did before we opened a trampoline park, we visited 14 trampoline parks throughout the Southeast. Now, it doesn't hurt that my boys are all travel soccer players. So we're playing soccer in a different city every weekend. And so we would just take our spare time and go look and see what kind of park they had. But I would literally sit there while my boys were playing and look and say, okay, what are the things that I see here that are cost objects? They're paying rent. Obviously, they're paying power and sewer and all of that kind of stuff. I would say that it probably took a good 6 months to develop that business plan and to develop those expenses in order to know what, everything was there. And I would leave every single one of those parks that we visited with notes that I had taken about new things that I needed to add into my pro forma and those types of things. I would start to meet friends and make acquaintances in the business, and I would really talk to those guys. But I will say one of the most important things that I did, and it doesn't answer the question, but I had a study group built into my family. And I don't know what it was that made me do this, but as soon as we got in the car after going to one of these trampoline parks, I would literally start talking to my kids. All right, what part of this did you like? What part didn't you like? What would you have liked to have seen better? And the feedback that, and I would make each one of them give me something good and something bad, and that was very beneficial. And I know I got lucky having those guys there, but it helped. And I will tell you that the things that they told us worked is the things that we implemented in our park. The things that they told us that wouldn't work, we shied away from, and we still do that. Now, I started the business 5 years ago, or at least started the idea 5 years ago. We've been open for a little more than 3 years now. Some of our boys are getting a little bigger. I've got a freshman in college at this point. He's no longer in the focus group. I've got a 16-year-old that thinks he's a little too cool for things like that. So he's no longer in the focus group. But the 12 and the 10-year-old definitely are still in the focus group. So we still do that. We're still, every time we travel, we look to see if there's a place that we need to go investigate. So I guess, yeah, it took about 6 months to develop the costs, to know what I was really doing, but I'm still learning. I'm still investigating. Once you get that business plan together, when I took a M.B.A. class, Dr. Diley, who I believe has passed away, I'm not sure, but Dr. Diley was my mentor in the business school in the M.B.A. program. He taught a capstone class. And one of the things that he would always say is your business is either growing or dying. That business plan is not done, because your what I would call your pro forma business plan then turns into, after you're open, it becomes your 1 year plan, your 3 year plan, your 5 year plan, your 10-year plan, or at least it becomes the basis for those. And I think that's one of the things that has continued to make me successful. He had two famous sayings, and I tell those a lot. The first one is your business is either growing or dying. The second thing that he said, and I distinctly remember thinking about this when I went to that first trampoline park. The other thing that he said was invest in things that your children are interested in. Now, I don't know what made me remember that, because it would have probably been around 1998 when he said that. Anna and I were dating. We weren't engaged. We later got married and had 4 children. Fast forward to 5 years ago, and I remembered that statement. One of the reasons why I thought, our town would need something like this. He said, invest in things that your children are interested in. Now, I don't think he meant go open a trampoline park so your kids will have a place to play. What I think he meant was, when your kids come home with this brand new contraption called an iPhone, it might be time to look at, if that's what they want for Christmas, it might be time to look into buying some Apple stock. I took a completely perverted look at that statement and changed it and said, well, let's open a trampoline park. I don't know what made me do that, but I distinctly remember that, that conversation with myself, staring at the front door, The other thing that I tell people about trampoline park, when I was looking at that trampoline park and thinking, well, why would this make a good business, is the number of the times the door opened and every person that walked in the door paid $20, and it's not hard to count by 20. That was a pretty easy determination. So, but yeah, good question. Good question. Anybody else have any others? I'm happy to
Trent,
answer. Yeah.
I have a question for you. At the
Okay.
beginning of your story, you mentioned how you got told no quite a few times.
Yep.
And it sounds like you had quite a few naysayers when this started on your radar. So talk to us about how, obviously your boys were all in, and maybe your
Yes.
wife was too,
Oh,
but how do you
my
deal with the
wife wasn't all in.
naysayers?
Oh no.
Oh,
Absolutely. The boys were on board. But my wife is characteristically conservative when it comes to finances, right? I think her retirement philosophy is, let's bury a bunch of money in a coffee can in the backyard, and we'll dig it up when we need it. She was not on board originally at all. But I will tell you this: everybody in this town thought I was absolutely nuts, because I think they thought the same thing. Look, for trampoline park, you got to drive. That's something that you're going to see in the big cities. You got to go to Macon, you got to go to Atlanta, you got to go to Jacksonville for those types of things. That's just not something that we do in Valdosta. And not only was it just the general public, but it was also the banks. Had I gone to a bank and said, I've got an idea, I want to build a 200-unit apartment complex, I could have, and it's a $10 million project, I could have gotten that project financed a heck of a lot easier than I did trampoline park. And the reason for that is it was completely outside their wheelhouse. They had no way to evaluate that. And even if I had gone to 14 trampoline parks, they hadn't seen that it was successful everywhere else. They hadn't done, and I gave them a copy of my business plan that showed, hey, these are the other cities that this is working in, and they're very similar to our city. There was a lot of challenges in opening that business and getting people to actually buy into it. And now, once we opened and everybody saw what a success it was, the challenges and the naysayers started to decline to some extent. But every time that we would do an expansion, I don't know about that. Is a laser tag facility really going to work in Valdosta? Why are you bringing? I do tell this story. The 5D experience that we have, there's only 15 of those in the United States. And I am good friends with our mayor here in Valdosta, and I tell the story that this machine doesn't belong in Valdosta, Georgia. It's something that you expect to see in Orlando, maybe Atlanta, but destination type places. It doesn't belong in Valdosta, Georgia. It makes him mad that I say that. He's like, we deserve it as much as anybody else does. He's exactly right, but it's not the thing that you would expect to see here. And so then the question becomes, well, if you don't expect it to see here or see it here, is it going to succeed? Are people really going to pay a little higher fee for an experience like that in a place like this? The answer has been absolutely. They've been willing to do it. And then, the same thing with an arcade. How are you really going to reinvent the wheel with an arcade? And my answer was, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Let's just do it right. Clean, safe, and fun is our mantra. And so as long as we stick to that, it works pretty good. But yeah, good question. Tons of naysayers. I was crazy. They thought I was nuts. And maybe I am, but I don't know. I thought it was a good idea. I thought it would work. On paper, it worked. And then we finally got it open and showed it did work. Then we got shut down for 8 weeks with COVID. I was a little worried that it might not work post-COVID. We didn't open up immediately when we were allowed to because I just didn't feel it was the right time. I felt like our parents needed a little more time. You got to think about it. I mean, that was back before we knew a lot of what we know now, and we still may not know a whole lot. But we waited. We didn't open up immediately as soon as we were first allowed to. And then again, going back to my education, one of the things that when we talk about business law, one of the case studies that we do in business law is the Tylenol fiasco from the early 80s. That's one of the case studies that we do in ethics and business law. And I remember there's an interview that I show all my students while we're doing that case study. And it was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson talking at the time about how people don't want to be advertised to during the middle of a crisis. And so I remember him saying something along the lines of, we need to convince our clients that this is safe before we convince them that they need to buy it. And again, I don't know why that stuck in my mind, but I was the same way. I think that made us successful. We didn't market, hey, it's time to come back. Our marketing shift to, this is what we're doing to make you safe if you come. We bought a lot of, well, we already had a lot of it, but electrostatic cleaning supplies and those types of things that we were doing in the business kind of before we'd even started, before we even knew about a pandemic. We just advertised that, look, this is what we're doing. And if it's time for you to come back, you make that decision. If it's not, that's fine. We saw a steady increase. So this would have been June of 2020, right? Is that right? Yeah, 2020. We saw, and I had already made the decision in that first 5 months that we were going to add laser tag. Luckily, I hadn't made the financial commitment. I just had made the business commitment. Hey, this is what we're going to do. I put that on hold and thinking, hey, well, we're going to be doing good if we ever open the business back up. Much less put a trampoline park in. We opened the business back up, and within a few weeks of opening, we could at least breathe a sigh of relief that we were hitting our break-even numbers. Okay, I can pay employees, I can pay my rent, I can pay my insurance. We're doing good. That's really all I cared about at the time. I had forgotten the 150%. I was pretty happy with that profit before COVID. What we saw, and I think one of the things that made us successful, advertising, look at what we're doing as far as what to make you safe. By October of 2020, we started seeing the crowds come back. Probably what I would say 80% of what we were seeing pre-pandemic were coming back. And at that point, I knew, hey, we may be back enough to start thinking about phase 2. So October 2020 is when I really dusted out all the phase 2 laser tag plans. And we really started hitting that hot and heavy maybe March of 2021. And we were open by September of 2021. So, and of course, there was a couple of scares in there. If you'll remember, we had a couple of outbreaks, the roller coasters up and down. Our business followed the roller coasters. When we would see an outbreak in Georgia, our population would decline. Of course, as soon as everything started to even out, we would see population come back a little bit. So we had to learn it as we went. But yeah, good question. Who else?
All right. Going once, going twice.
My final question, and most important.
There we go.
The boys sick of jumping?
No, actually not. Because every year we've added something a little bit more. So now they're very excited about going to the arcade. But when you're 10 and 12, your life revolves around dodgeball. And dodgeball on trampolines is apparently a wonderful thing for a 10 or 12-year-old. So they will always go. And the funny thing is, a lot of people think I'm up there running that business. I'm not. So when I go up there, it's because of them. They want to go. So they meet their friends there on the weekends. Obviously, it's a pretty popular thing that your dad owns a trampoline park. So they enjoy that. But yeah, the smaller ones, absolutely. The 16-year-old has just started working at the trampoline park. And so he literally, he turned 16 yesterday. And so now he's interested in things like gas money. The high schooler, or excuse me, the college student, he worked his way through high school working there. So it's been an entire family experience. Anna is full on board now. She was dead set against it at the very beginning. She was one of the first ones, though. I'll have to give her that. She was one of the first ones to come around and say, maybe he's on to something. Now she fully enjoys it. Like I told you, she's a pharmacist, but she's starting to take a larger role. I think she's going to end up being, she really likes our redemption store for where you trade all your tickets for the neat toys. And she's starting to take a liking to going out and finding the newest and neatest kind of things. I really see her in the next couple of months developing that as kind of her niche of this business. So it's fun. It's a full family experience, but no, they do not get tired of going to a trampoline park. So, and I don't either. It's fun. Now there's something for me to do. I don't jump. I'm 50 years old. I know my limitations. I don't jump. I will play laser tag. We've got a brand new zombies game on that 5D, which is pretty cool. Wow. But the thing that I enjoy the most is going to play on those arcades and those types of things, because that's fun. We got a new question?
We do. It looks like it says, how would you recommend those with no business experience get started and getting really just the information to one day start their own business?
Research as much as you possibly can. I would say this, if you know the area of business that you're interested in, if at all possible, try to get a job in that line if you can, to start out and get as much experience. I didn't have that. And I think to some extent it may have held us back a little bit. We didn't know what we didn't know. I know that sounds stupid and I hate to say it, but there's a lot of truth to that. But investigate. I spent, you can imagine 4 boys and running a law practice at the time, teaching part-time on the side. I spent every waking hour that I had other than that on this business plan. And we would, like I told you, we would schedule our travel so that we could research this plan. Don't rush it. Let it come to you is the main piece of advice that I would give you. I really think we did that right. We waited for the right time. We found the right location. We didn't try to push it. I think a lot of people try to rush their business open. And I'm going back to my legal experience now. I think a lot of people try to rush their business open before they're ready. And you can kind of see some dollar signs and how much money we're going to make with this. And you may not have perfected or honed the practice that you're going to use to make people comfortable with your product, to buy your product, and more importantly, to be repeat business. And so I think of a local restaurant as an example that tried to rush everything through, opened up probably before they were ready, You ever been to a restaurant and everybody's excited about it? It's the newest and the greatest thing in town, and it's the worst food that you've ever had. There was a recent experience like that. I think you're better off to wait, even though that may be financially difficult, until you're actually ready to open it up and everything looks really good. But yeah, no business experience. That's if you can, try to get some experience, but if you can't, research that experience. And I'll say this: I'm not afraid to ask for help, especially if, I didn't have any competitors in my town, so there was really nobody for me to ask any questions here. But if I was going to, Orlando, Florida, or Miami, Florida, or wherever, and we would go to a trampoline park, I would introduce myself and try to see, can I talk to the manager? Can I talk to the owner? And I would tell them, look, I'm from way up in Georgia. I'm not competing with you, but I'd like to open a business like yours, and I really think yours is neat. Would you spend 15 minutes and talk to me and tell me what I don't know? What were the hurdles for you? What made it difficult for you to open the business? What do you wish you knew? And then I would also say, okay, this is what I do know, because people want to know that you're invested, other than you're just when you go to someone for advice, they want to know that you've done a little work and you're not just trying to get somebody to spoon feed you. When they see that and they see that you're invested, people are willing to help you. And I learned that early. I remember an experience in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that we were there at a trampoline park, and I met the owner and said, okay, will you help me? And we still communicate to this day. So the last thing I'll add to that is typically there are a lot of trade shows with just about any type of business that you're interested in. Start going to those. As a student, most of those trade shows will allow you to go for free. Now, they charge us a ton of money to get in, but the education that you can get, my wife laughs at me. I go to Vegas for a huge trade show, and you think I'm out there playing and having fun and gambling. I'm really not. I go to all the lectures that they give. And I do gamble a little bit at night. Don't tell her that. But you can go to any trade show as a student, and they will typically have a free pass or a discounted pass. Go to that education. If you're interested in opening a restaurant, if you're going to open a pizza place, start going to pizza trade shows. Find out if there are pizza, and I'll tell you there are pizza trade shows, but find out if there's trade shows and what you're interested in, and go to those. I think that's about the best advice I can give you. But ask for help. People will help.
Well, again, Trent, thank you not only for your time, but the additional time in answering everyone's questions. I know everyone was so grateful to hear from you.
I just looked at my clock. I didn't realize how long we had gone.
No, this is perfect. This was the time allotted, and really, I just thank you so much again. Everyone on the screen, I'm gonna give a quick plug, just sort of in relation to what Trent's saying. If you have questions about things on how to get started, not only with that, you have mentors, you have Trent, you have people that you can ask, but there are some other avenues that you have to remember. And that is, you need someone to talk to, talking about what paths you're interested in. And there are a lot of different things that you may need to get prepared to do that. One may be to start with your career documents. Maybe you got to dust off that resume. You got to write a cover letter, figure out how you want to do some of these cold outreach style things. If you're interested in going to shadow someone doing what you have an interest in doing, start with scheduling an appointment with us in our office. Let's help you get those documents together. Let's help you figure out how you want to do these types of outreach, and really start gaining that experiential learning that you're looking for to head down the path that you're interested in, and maybe opening up opportunities to places you had no idea. Because what Trent said before, I say that phrase very often, you don't know what you don't know. And so you've only been exposed to so much up to this point. And so let's find new ways to get you exposed to other things of interest. But this is how you'll schedule your appointment through your Handshake account. And I think that's all I really have for us today. Again, we can give Trent sort of, I know we're on Zoom, so our all muted like silent applauses for his time today. And just, I'm going to end the Zoom now, but thank you everybody. Thank you so much. And now, Trent, we hope you have an amazing rest of your Wednesday, and we hope that we can get you back here again at Mercer and talk to us soon.
Absolutely. Anytime. Y'all
All
take
right.
care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.